Hello, friend, and welcome back to another episode of the Sex Upgraded podcast. My name is Taylor, and I'll be your host for this episode. And I'm really excited to be here with my guest, Londin Winters, today. Londin, thank you so much for being here. And if you're new to the podcast, just a quick introduction. This podcast exists to help men create and have the best sex and relationship lives possible for the sake of improved lives for everybody in the world. And I'm of the belief that if we do improve our sex lives, that actually has a positive ripple effect out into everything we do, from our friendships and our family life to our business life, our money life, our creative life, and all of those things. Because sex is it's kind of at the core of who we are as people. And last year, my partner Naima and I, who I have sex with, it's related. We went to an in-person workshop with Londin and her partner, Justin, and it was about sexual charge, sexual polarity. It was a couples workshop, and it was a really beautiful and powerful experience for both of us. And we had, I'll just say, maybe you can clip this for your own testimonial. We had some of the best sex of our entire relationship after your workshop. And it lit a lot of things up for us and inspired us. And we still use some of the practices we learned from that. And so I'm excited to dive into some of those topics with you here today, dive into sexual polarity, dive into perhaps the dangers of sexual polarity, the semantics of it, how we can talk about it, and to learn from somebody who is a woman who's really practiced like you, who's in relationship with men. So that's the intro. Thank you, Londin, so much for being here. And I'd love it if you could just give a little intro to who you are and what is the work that you're doing in the world right now.
Well, I am a woman in my 50s who has been practicing what I call sexual yoga for a very long time. I'm in a committed relationship, monogamous at the moment. And we have a daughter together. So we're raising a 6-year-old. We run a business together, and we pretty much are best friends. We spend all of our time together. And we also have like radical sex, which is so nice because we've been together forever, just with each other forever. And it's still epic for both of us.
How long is forever?
I'm not good with time because the deeper we get, the weirder it gets. Yeah. But I believe if you ask Justin, he would say 15 years.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Nice.
Sorry.
That's great. That's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But what's beautiful is it's been so long that it's defying logic in terms of that sex can be that good after you've had sex that many times. And we practice a lot. So we've had sex millions of times, and it's still like pretty much mind-blowing to this day.
Beautiful. Yeah. It's also your profession, like not sex, but helping people with their sex lives, right? And you primarily specialize in helping women. Is that right? Like I looked at your website and checked out your work, and you offer retreats and workshops for women. And then you and Justin together offered couples programs.
We do. So I work with women part of my story is I was very successful in the business world. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I'm now in my 50s. So in my 20s and 30s, I was really successful as a businesswoman, manifesting whatever I wanted. I knew all about manifestation back then, and I was just creating awards. I won an Emmy when I was in my 20s, financial freedom, like kind of did all the stuff. And it was like every accomplishment I put under my belt, I was just not it. It was like really exciting to feel myself that powerful, but I just didn't feel met by life. And I had the fortune at 38 of discovering like real sexual yoga work. And I realized that everything I was doing in my professional life was like penetrating energy, mission, like make it happen. And what was going to ignite my sex life and my romantic experience was surrender. And so I pivoted and I began to work in surrender. And I became a very, very, very dedicated practitioner. Some people find out about sexual yoga and they love the concepts and they love thinking about it. But then there's the people that find out about it and they put it in the body. And that was me. I was like, I am literally going to wear this because this is the deepest truth I know. And to this day, having taught now for over a decade, leading workshops constantly, we're always on Patreon. You know, I'm always teaching, but I still see myself as a practitioner above all, because this practice pretty much gives you the life that everything else promises to give you, but doesn't. And that was my story. So and Justin's the same way. Like, we really live it, and we live it in circumstances where you would think it would just die.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for that. I think this is a really sweet opportunity to be here with you and for all the listeners to be here with you, because a question I get asked a lot in some of my courses and with some of the men that I work with is, what's out there for women? You know, like, what happens in the female world? And I think in this episode, we're going to be very gendered and talk about mostly heteronormative relationships. But yeah, like, what goes on there? Because there's a lot of, masculine leadership, you know, be directive, be penetrative, be all this stuff. And like, what's going on the other side of things? Like, what is it like to speak with somebody who's cultivated in that part? So I'd love to get into all that. But first, I'd love to start with a question that struck both Naima and I when we were at your workshop. And you said that at first, when you and Justin started diving into polarity work, like, you loved it, but then it started to kind of kill your relationship. And I'd love to just start with, like, what is the danger of polarity work, or a certain kind of polarity work, and how did it lead you to that, however you want to describe it, toxic or defunct or chargeless space? And yeah, could you share a little bit of that journey?
Sure. Do I have a moment to just take a breath and like really drop in with it?
Please. Yeah.
Okay,
Let's
yeah,
all
cool.
do that. Yeah.
All right, cool. So to master something, you got to give yourself to it, right? So Justin and I really gave ourselves to all the rules of polarity as it related to like masculine and feminine. So I took all of that business side of myself and I sort of was like, ooh, that doesn't earn me love. You know, what earns me love is, you know, moving and being soft and surrendered. And Justin was like, oh, you know, the part of me that's been a musician my whole life, that's a little more flowy. I'm going to go for my meditator. You know, he's been meditating since he was 11. He was like, I'm putting on all my like straight spine stuff. And we had explosive sex that way. I mean, one time a nearby neighbor threw a piece of furniture against the wall because our sex was so explosive, you know, it was like obnoxious. And polarity will do that. And when you know that, you love that. But when you forget that you're playing a game and you start taking on identities of like, I can't ever be functional again. I need to just be surrendered. Or, you know, Justin, like, I can't have any feelings. She doesn't want my feelings. She doesn't want my self-doubt. She wants my direction. Well, we really put these on to the max and we played it out. And what ended up happening was we stopped evolving as people. And we were just like playing games of sensation at that point. Like, neither of us was really feeling like we were heading into our true self. And both of us kind of felt like we were like no longer allowed to show half of our being to the other because it would break the rules. But it actually got worse than that. That alone was like, okay, whatever, we're just doing this. What really started to tip the scales into damage was when it was like bad tennis partners. So like, you know, if you were playing couples tennis and like the ball bounces out and you look at each other like, you missed the serve. No, you missed the serve. It was becoming like that. Like, well, I'd be more masculine if you could be more feminine. And I was like, well, I could be more feminine if you could keep your word, you know? And it just started to be like weaponized. And then we actually found ourselves having sex less, fighting more, combined with kind of like forgetting some of our best parts, you know, like I was amazing in my quote unquote masculine, like great leader, really good manifester, super clear. He was amazing in his quote unquote feminine parts. Like he's a brilliant musician that's toured the world. Like nobody knows this about Justin. He's toured the world as a musician. He's like a virtuoso on the guitar. And we had let go of those things because we were trying to fit into a model. So what we've noticed is it's really hard to sustain a long-term relationship when you're playing polarity as a kind of act. But we love polarity. And polarity was like the best thing either of us had ever discovered. So what our work is really based on is how do we take all of the wonderful things about polarity? How do we look at the original teachings? Not when they traveled over like telephone to the West, but like when they were first brought through in the mystics. We studied all of that. We went deep. Things you don't normally hear about in polarity teachings. We looked at like the origin stories. And then we brought it through what we call our laboratory, like our practice every day, interacting in sexual yoga. And that's where a lot of what you see in our work comes from today. And what was so great about refining the ideas to the true intent is now we feel like we're growing sexually and spiritually together and alone. You know, like, and also the harmony. I mean, we can have explosive sex, but not end up in a fight the next day. So we really refined it all to a place where we're back in love with it, living it as the basis of our lives, and it's really feeding us.
Yeah, you said a couple of things that really stuck out for me. One of them is the term playing polarity. Like, I think that's a really important piece, you know, playing polarity versus existing in this idea of what it is. Like I heard you say, it sounds like you didn't use these words, but it sounded like you both lost an important part of your soul, you know, like losing the soul of music for one, losing the soul of like being able to get shit done and being productive in the world. Like that's a certain aspect of consciousness that's really potent too, you know? And so when you let that identity go, it's like, oh, who am I? And also, kind of just like train wreck of dynamics going on.
Well, and, you know, one of the key influencers, Harish, said, you know, the most dangerous thing is a half-truth. And that's what's so tricky about polarity, because it contains so many half-truths. You think you're on track with the truth, but then everything's kind of falling apart around you. And you're like, I'm so confused. Like this work seems so genius. It seems so true. The sun and the moon are in perfect polarity all the time. Like, isn't this the basic truth of duality? But then why is my life falling apart and I can't even remember who I am anymore? And so it's the half-truths that really mess the whole thing up. And that's what you're describing is like the soul only responds to that total absolute truth, right? And when we're in alignment with that, it's just like everything's in. And the sex becomes infinitely better because now you can move into subtle sex. When you're in gross polarity with half-truths, you're having a lot of like, you know, physical bumping up sex. It's really explosive, like I said. Once you get into those full truths, now you guys are both starting to have subtle sex, which is much more like galaxies colliding and like bodies opening like billowing sheets. And that's where the long extended male and female orgasms come from. So the other thing that was so great about finding a new way was coming back into all of that subtle body awakening that is precious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's beautiful. It's beautiful stuff. It's really potent. And there's one thing I want to mention before we keep going. And if you want to dive more into the actual model of this, like I interviewed Justin earlier on this podcast, and we'll talk about the actual model. And I think it's important to note that the words you have both chosen to use instead of masculine and feminine are alpha and omega, more like free of the construct or ideas of man, woman, gender, to more accurately represent just different flavors of consciousness, right? Like different flavors of energy that exist within all of us. So I appreciate that distinction a lot. That alone unlocked some things for me.
amazing.
Yeah. So one thing, and this is going to be a little bit of a nuanced question. I'll see if I can talk around it and see if you can kind of get what I'm trying to speak to, is that in the world of men's work, there's a lot of people, and myself included, using the term masculine leadership and sexual leadership and like being directive, being penetrative, being the sort of like that. And one thing I've started to notice, and I've seen this in myself too, is just a little bit of confusion around like, what's the feminine side of that? Or like, what's an acceptable thing to ask or want for from our feminine partner or female partner in this dance of that? Does that make sense? Like,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I love that question. I never get this question, but this is a regular part of my private client sessions. I really appreciate men who are studying masculine leadership. I just want to say firsthand, because when a woman feels led, she can surrender, she can relax, she can kind of like, I love the visual of like heading out for the date, and she can kind of sink into the car seat and feel the engine in her body and roll down the window and look over like, thanks, this is the best part of my day, you know? But what I really hear you asking is like, what's the equivalent for men? And one of the big pieces about my work is that women have an equal role as men in how this intimacy is going. And so, you know, you're not just rewilding. You're not just expressing. You know, that could look like closed heart venom, you know. Rewilding could look like basically just having no accountability to how you're affecting your partner's heart with the way that you're behaving. And thinking that men are always leading, you really lose the gift that you're the leader of love. So I'll give you an example.
And we're talking about women here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll give you an example. I have a client who, she and her partner just moved in together. And this was the guy that didn't want to be in a relationship, didn't want to be in a commitment, definitely didn't want to move in. You know, I mean, he's like Mr. Freedom, you know? But he had this huge experience because of who she's been being in the relationship, that he's just like, I want to be with you. Like, I'll explain why that happened later, because that's an important piece. But basically he was like, all right, we're doing this. And he moved from where he was at to her, which is a big thing, to a new house, big thing, in a commitment, big thing, all of it. Well, typical men losing their freedom. It wasn't like he came in with a marching band and bells on. He came in like a grumpy grandpa, you know, like dragging his feet, having like really existential, rough moments. And when she first met with me, she was like, God, it's like everything that had us want to be together is gone. He always feels vacant. He's so grumpy, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, but your man just gave up his lifetime freedom to commit to being in a relationship with you, and he's moving in with you. And she was like, oh yeah. And I was like, and you're making yourself the same as him, maybe because you love him and you sympathize with him. But where's your party? Like, this is the coolest moment of your life. You have this like phenomenal guy moving in with you, and you get to play house and like have fun. And I was like, what are all the things you're not doing anymore? And she's like, well, I don't like to put on my music because, you know, he might not like my music. And I was like, bring on the music. And she was like, I could be planning meals, but instead I'm so like torn up over his mood, I'm just like brooding. I was like, let's get the meals going. What about like, if you were to play house and like make him a sexy meal, what would you be wearing? What would you be wearing while you're cooking the meal? Like, this is your party. And so she decided to bring her leadership in love. Like, this moment is precious. We may not be alive tomorrow. We have the greatest love on the planet, and you're actually making this huge leap into our relationship. She started celebrating and partying and having a blast. I kid you not, 1 week later, she had pulled him completely out of his mood, and they were like having the greatest time moving in together. And this to me sums it up. It's like, if you could be the leader of love, you're bringing energy into this vibe. You're bringing color. You're bringing life. You're bringing like, babe, get over it. I'm right here. Let's do this. You know, you're kissing him all over the face when he's all grumpy. You're giving him nicknames. You know, I called Justin like, okay, grumpy grandpa. And then we're laughing and having fun. But I am owning my role as the leader of love, because you know why? Love is everything to me. It is the absolute point. Like, I had a lifetime of career successes and I love them, and I'm still really good at business, but I don't like get wet from business. Justin is like the point, and so is my 6-year-old. And so I bring my leadership to like make it awesome. You know what I mean? Like, to dress in ways and cook in ways and music playing in the house, and like loving the fact that this man is freaking great and I get to live with him. Now, if that sounds like 1950s, I'm just cringing. Like, some people might hear that and be like, oh my God, is that really you think all you're good for? And I just want to say, if you know anything about our work, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Like, consciousness is my compass, but I'm also not afraid to party and like enjoy and be in the moment, because the moment is full of orgasmic incredibleness. And as a yogini, that's what you're studying. Like, what a great thing to study.
Yeah. I love that. I love leadership in love, or leading through love. And it kind of like, it breaks a little bit of, I think it's perhaps breaking some people's brains listening to this, or I know it breaks the mold of what a lot of people think about relationship leadership too. And it's, I think there's a lot of women out there who have never even heard that term before, who might not even know like they have that capability, because perhaps they've been following people who say like the man's the leader, like he leads in this way and this way and this way. And like, it sounds, the visual I'm getting almost as you're speaking is there's this almost like coiling together of dual leadership just in your own chosen avenues, you know?
100%. And he loves it. He loves it because, well, let's put it this way. Like, if you look at what it looks like, a man who's been leading exclusively for more than 3 months to a year, he's resentful and tired. He needs a certain thing back because he's giving up all of his like flow for hers. And if she's not bringing it and she's wearing her, you know, baggy sweats, he's like, what am I getting at? You know, it's that tennis thing. But when you're both uplifting each other all the time and you're not worried about like this is why we gave up the gender stuff. Like, we're consciousness and we're love. Justin and I think of each other as conscious love. We're not really worried about who's leading, but Justin does have a consciousness that is so worthy of sexual worship, and it polarizes me every time. And I happen to be like a giant goofball. You know, he calls me voluptumunch. Like, I happen to just be like that all the time, and it polarizes the crap out of him. So we're still kind of doing traditional polarity, but we're not cutting parts of ourselves off.
Yeah.
To do it. And I just want to say that's more like playing polarity. And what we're doing is we're letting polarity arise out of true surrender into the ultimate spiritual truth. And when you get out of the way, life knows how to do polarity way better than your limited egoic brain does. And if you look at most of our practices, at this point, we're practicing completely getting out of the way, where my body is in full equanimous animation. I'm not even in charge. And his body is in like, consciousness that fills up the entire neighborhood. And from there, polarity shows itself to us and we stand amazed. And that's, I think, what everybody really wants too.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's take a breath to that, because love taking breaths. So let's all, even you listening, let's take a breath. Yeah, that's rich. That's juicy. I was looking at your website. This is related, and looking at the event that you have coming up next month. I'm sure it's something you do regularly if people don't have enough time to join, but some of your bullet points are really interesting to me. I'd love to dive into some of them. Let me choose one here. Like, I think, yeah, in the line of, you say like, bring the music, like bring the dance, bring that sort. There's like a colorful energy to it. One of the bullet points is, you say to invite his sexual worship at any age. And this is something that I think a lot of women are really craving, is like they want to be worshiped. And yeah, could you just speak to that a little bit?
From my age or just in general?
Just in general. Like
just in general?
Yeah, because it's one of the things that's here on the workshop page. And I think it's a dynamic that it speaks to the dual leadership of things, like how can, and what's reasonable as a man to want or desire from our female partners, or what's even possible, I guess, is a question,
Well, first of all, it feels amazing to be sexually worshipped. And, I'm currently 54. I didn't think that was possible. I'm not worried about aging at all, because he's worshiping me for things that have nothing to do with like whether my skin is tight. He's worshiping me for the way I see him. I see him like an oracle. I listen to my body and I say, I see you're very clear right now. And he goes, got it. He worships me for how I feel. I'll be in the car and I'll say, I feel happier than I've ever felt in my life, because I can feel our union is so easy. And he'll just sit in that for like 10 minutes without saying anything and just like driving. I mean, those are classic moments in a marriage. Mm-hmm. He worships me for my sexual availability. I am dedicated to sex as a living prayer. I do not let myself go offline. And I don't do it to be loved. I do it because I believe that pleasure is the guide. I mentioned to you when we said hello that I'm on day 22 of a parasympathetic journey where I'm like looking to stay in parasympathetic through every part of my life continuously, because there's like so much pleasure in connection to the deepest place that orients you to the deepest place. And he's getting this from me all the time, instead of drama, neediness. I also have a very strong consciousness practice, because it creates equanimity in me, where if he does lose my trust, I can very gently say, I think I'm losing trust, rather than spazzing out on him like that's okay. That's not okay. Nobody deserves that. Even men who are trying to improve themselves and make a mistake, they don't deserve that. It's just not what I believe. And so as a result, there's trust and love that is just constantly weaving itself together in this model. And it comes on top of like genuine seeing, like I see him from my body. I stay in my body. Genuine feeling. I'm not afraid of feelings, whether they're full body 10-minute orgasms or anger. And equanimity of allowing it all to be there in the dignity of the moment, not trying to fix everything into some idea from my egoic mind of what's going to deliver me love.
Yeah.
It's more about what's going to make him bigger, and then he's what's going to make her bigger. And that devotion just creates sacred relationship. Oh. So those things create a woman to be worthy of sexual worship. And they have nothing to do with age, size. Like the thing I love most about my women is like every imaginable kind of woman is in my community. It's like a whole rainbow of people. And they're all just wild yoginis.
Yeah.
There's so much permission to just be you.
Yeah. Sexy is a vibe. Yeah. Right? Sexy is a vibe, for sure. I'd like to take a moment during this episode to let you know that this podcast is made possible without sponsors or advertisements because of all the men who go through my Orgasmic Mastery course and through my in-person retreats. Thank you to all those men. And I want to let you know also that there is another 10-week large group Orgasmic Mastery course happening later this year. And I have 2 retreats coming up later this year as well. The first one of those is for any man who wants to integrate his heart and sex into a really powerful, fun, pleasure-filled, sexually confident life. And the second retreat is for any man who's in some form of a leadership position or a position of impact or influence in the world. That could be an entrepreneur, that could be a yoga teacher, that could be a retreat leader, that could be a manager in a company. Any man who wants to really refine himself as an instrument of creation. So you can more powerfully create the things that are important to you and create the kind of world you want to see. And to have fun in the process of it too. It's going to be an awesome, awesome time. And I will put links to all 3 of these things in the episode description. So without further ado, thank you again to all of these men. Thank you for being here. And let's get back into today's episode. I'd love it if you could speak a little bit more to the part around, you said, I don't let myself not be turned off, or like, you remember what you said? Like, I don't let myself be turned. I don't remember the exact wording you said, but I could think, and some people listening, they might be thinking, oh, she's just doing this in service of the man, to be sexually available. And my guess, and I'd love for you to speak on this, is that no, you're doing this because of your own practice of like how it feels to be in your own body and to be in relationship. Right. And,
well, I also, I know. Okay, there's a lot to this. Do you want me to like really? Okay.
Yeah, let's do it. I think it's really a rich topic. Yeah,
it is a very rich topic. So,
and also to not, I'm sorry to interrupt your thought process, but also to not demonize doing something for your partner either, because I think that's really beautiful.
That's where I was going.
Yeah.
That's exactly where I was going.
Yeah, so,
I am not afraid to sexually worship him as much as he's worshiping me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not afraid of that, but it took me years of work to get there. Because prior to having like real sovereignty, that was a really dangerous idea. That's like the land of codependency. That's the land of completely losing yourself, and like ending up in a breakup 5 years later and wondering where the last 5 years went. None of that is happening over here. So I am equally willing to worship at his altar as he is at mine. And that's a foundational part of my teachings, is like this idea of how did you love before you knew hurt? How did you love before you knew hurt? Because the part of yourself that wants to like grip onto self is the part that's hurt. And you don't do it against yourself. You unwind the pieces that blocked you from how you loved before you knew hurt. And then you're loving from effulgence. You're loving from a natural spring that's overflowing inside of you. You're sexing from there. Now let's talk about that. Is sex as a living prayer is as much for me as it is for the relationship. For me, what does it take to go offline sexually? And I can confidently speak to this because, I am an older woman. Like, I'm in the age where most people say it's like over, but it's like better than ever. I have clients who have had full hysterectomies that are some of the most sexually alive people I know. It's not related to the physical. It's related to how much you've armored up, how much tension you hold, not just in your yoni, but in your heart, in your solar plexus, primarily in your throat. How much, every swallowed no is a lost yes.
Yeah.
If you start swallowing your nose in some codependent please him dynamic, you won't be wet anymore. You might open your legs, but you're not going to be there. And when I talk about it, I'm talking about giving him all of me connected to the deepest places in me sacredly. I'm talking about maintaining an atmosphere of trust and love where I still feel like blooming. And really standing by that. And I do a lot of my own personal solo work staying alive in that, because, you know, I always joke with my women that your sexuality is like a sponge right here, 1 inch below the belly button. And if you haven't watered that sponge, it's like that crusty, disgusting one in the back of your kitchen cabinet that the cleaning lady used like a year ago. But if you're breathing into that every day, if you're moving with that every day, if you're eating in a way that supports that, like a big part of it's my diet. If you're hydrating in a way, a big part of it's my hydration. If you're copping to the moments that you lose trust, these are all the things you need to do to have this like wet, spongy sponge that is super excited to make love. And so it's both, you know, it's being willing to worship him, and it's being willing to worship me and the best parts of me, and not letting life get so busy that I'm forgotten. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And it sounds like you're able to do that while also still being in touch with the parts of yourself that can get shit done in the world.
That's what I have a teaching on this, because it's one of the foundational pieces that I'm always teaching women. I call it energetic agility. And every modern woman needs it. It's like the way a basketball player could dribble left, dribble right, no problem. I just did those backwards, but you get the idea.
Yeah.
You know, or could like shoot a layup on either side. This is what a modern woman needs to be able to do, is literally pivot from her alpha to her omega in a drive home before a date. So like she's at work. And the thing is, I always have all my women upgrade their alpha so they're not depleted by it. So they feel like really sexy, kicking ass all day at work, loving whatever they're up to. And in the car, knowing exactly how to switch back into their omega so that by the time they get home, they have this incredible intimacy with their man. You know, most women really like an alpha guy. So it's not so much like learning how to be with an omega man as it is learning how to put your alpha in the right places that serve, and then bring your omega where you're not kind of like crowding him out for the lead. Yeah.
And to echo that one piece, like one of the things I've heard most commonly from women in these spaces is, oh, I just want to be ravished. Like, I just want to be taken. I just want to surrender to, I just want to, you know, be like penetrated, not just physically, but energetically as well. Not everyone uses that language, but that's kind of the essence of what they're talking about. And I think there's a lot of men out there who want to do that, but don't know how, or maybe are afraid to do that as well. Which could be another direction of a conversation, but just want to acknowledge, like you said, I think most women want an alpha man. And like, I think that's mostly true also from what I've seen and my conversations with people, you know, and a lot of what I've had conversations with guys around is, how do you really own your desire to do that? And then do that in a healthy way, you know, do that in a way that actually people like really get lit up by, you know, that's rich. It's rich. There was one piece that you said that I wanted to double click on. Yeah, let me ask this one piece. So we're talking about this conscious love, right? This lifting each other up, and you're in this. Maybe it's the dress you're wearing, maybe it's your background, but I'm really getting the vibe of color. You know, color when we're talking about like, oh, you're bringing this life in, you're bringing the food, the dancing, the music, that there's this colorful aspect of things. So, what are ways that you feel most supported by Justin to be in this mode, right? Because it's not like we're not. Yes, there's sovereignty, but we're not completely independent of each other, right? And you can each support each other to be in these modes while you're each doing your own individual practice. So are there ways that he supports you to be able to be in more of this?
Oh, man. He's always supporting me. One thing that supports me more than anything, and I don't know if you've experienced this in the people that, you talk to in your men's group, but the woman in the relationship can kind of have like an insatiable demand for connection. And the man, especially when he's trying to lead, he needs space. He needs space to do his work. He needs the cave to all of the things. And Justin and I have formal practice, and that is one of the biggest things that supports me blooming, because I know when I'm going to get his presence and when I'm not. And therefore, I'm not trying to get his presence like sideways all day long. I actually have a place, and then I can prepare for it. Like I wear like wild outfits. I plan them. I love like buying them and then wearing them and knocking his socks off. It gives me all this place to like be the blooming flower and be seen, as opposed to trying to be the blooming flower and always feeling like he's got his mind on his work, or he's going to another call, or now he's got this thing and he's got that thing, and he's just a moving ship that I'm never, I'm wilting over here in the corner. So ironically, for the men, giving your woman a date that she can count on, where you really bring it, like you bring all those pieces that create rapture for her. And then for the woman, not holding the past against him in those moments. What I see the most that women get wrong is that he finally gives her his presence, like undivided. He's breathing, he's doing all the work, And then she's like, I want to talk about Wednesday.
Just felt a little contraction in my chest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like she's like, I finally got you, and now I got a beef to air out. And it turns into like talk therapy session.
Yeah.
Not polarized. Nobody's met by the end of it. But what she could do is learn how to meet him. And this is the spiritual work in the present moment. In the present moment. Do you like his breath? Do you like his posture? Do you like his presence? Can you feel him like a blue sky with no clouds in it? Can you let your body feel that this man is giving you everything he's got? He might have effed up huge on Wednesday. No doubt. But he's showing up now. And that's the hardest piece for the yogini, for the female in the equation, is to be present. And when I say present, I mean here and only here right now. And the irony is that's what's standing between you and rapture. Because rapture only exists in the right now moment. And if you feel like you've got to sweep up every piece of dust from the last week, you're still in the past. And if you've got to brace yourself against him going back to work the next day and like you feeling abandoned, you're in the future. But if you're going to be a rock star yogini, you're in the present. And you drink that moment like nectar, and you dilate it in your cells, and you get fully filled to the brim. And that is the formula for rapture. And then the irony or the beauty and the original alchemy from way back in the original teachings is that's a fire where every bit of last week burns off. And real yoginis, all my most advanced students know this. And so they don't feel like they're compromising themselves by showing up present. They're there for the real alchemy, not the kind that talk therapy kind of like promises, but then it's not unifying in that sexual way. It's unifying around ideas and agreements and plans, and that's has a beautiful place in a relationship. But rapture is not there. Rapture is in the right now moment with one partner soft and another partner hard. And the two of those.
Mm. That's really interesting to me. You said one thing that I noticed, it kind of like flipped my brain in the moment just now, because I was thinking as you were speaking, oh, she's not saying to bypass the challenges, right? She's probably going to say, you can still set a time to talk about the things. And I think, yes, of course, that's important too. But then to hear you say, no, it's actually in the rapture, in the moment of connection, in the moment of that sexual alchemy, that whatever the thing is that happened, at least in part, actually starts to get healed in a way that talking about it couldn't touch in the same way. Is that accurate?
I would push my chips in a little more and say not just in part, in total. Once you achieve rapture, because all of those fights are our attempts to love. And why do we attempt to love? To create this. And what does rapture represent? Two bodies that have become one in this. And so in the same way, it's an easy way of giving you an analogy around this is like a meditator doesn't go to the cushion to solve the problems of their day. They go to the cushion to realize the place where there are no problems from the day. But it's exactly the same in sexual yoga. When you truly know how to achieve rapture together, those problems from Wednesday seem like a joke inside of the unification, like ecstatic bliss union of your two bodies. You just laugh at the idea that you thought maybe he didn't love you on Wednesday. There's no need to talk about it. Justin and I haven't talked about anything in years because the alchemy restores the thing that the talking about it hopes to achieve. Now, granted, if we have an agreement that he takes out the trash and he's not doing that, we'll have a talk about that. All
right.
But not the things that have to do with am I loved? Am I trusted? Am I succeeding? Am I failing? Do they still want me? Mm-hmm. Is she gonna, is she gonna shut me down in my desire? All of the things that really matter for intimacy.
Yeah.
As opposed to functional household stuff.
Totally. That makes a lot of sense. And so one of the things that I'm hearing from you that sounds really important, at least from your perspective or the woman's perspective, is to be able to go into a space where this can happen, you need to be able to trust the space and trust that he's actually going to be there for some certain amount of time and not be distracted or not leave early, but actually be present with you. Like when you say, oh, there's a scheduled thing, you can trust and relax into knowing that this is what's going to happen. You're not going to get derailed. I or he is not going to just start thinking about some other project. It's no, it's a dedicated devotion in that moment to the connection.
Our couples, we have couples who fall in love with this. They do it every day. We have couples that are crazy busy. They can only do 20 minutes, but that 20 minutes is enough. And all of the practices are listed in our book. So you don't even have to wonder what the practice is. There's a practice guide in the back and you just do those or the recordings. But 20 minutes is enough. And for the men, the thing that's so great about the scheduled practice time is that's what she can put her neediness into. Meaning instead of just tapping on your shoulder all day, she can be like, oh, my time is coming and it's going to be here. And I know I'll get them then. And I really think it solves so much of the problems that couples have, because the typical problem couples have is the woman feels invisible and the man feels like she's insatiable.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious to ask you about another pattern that I've often seen in certain relationships where there's, let's see how to say this. The man, this has been an issue that I've worked with too. And I'm still a work in progress, accessing emotions, really accessing feeling, being skilled at knowing what's actually happening internally in some of those moments of conversation. Sometimes it can be tricky for me. And I've seen patterns in some men where it's oh, you're in a conversation or you're in a moment of connection and the man almost goes into some sort of freeze or shut down because there's oh, I don't know what I'm feeling, or maybe I'm feeling too many things and I'm needing to put it into words right now. And then there's almost this expectation coming from the woman of, oh, but I want to know what you're feeling. I want to know what's real with you. And there's this kind of roadblock or bottleneck that happens. And I think I have a few questions kind of floating around in there, but I'd love it if you could just speak to that dynamic a little bit.
Well, one question I have is, are the men or yourself that you're speaking of, do they wish they could feel more? Or do they wish that they didn't have to feel? Like, do they wish that she would see the other part of them that's bringing the structure and not be asked to feel? Which, because there's two different, and anytime you're in this debate with yourself, you should always be asking yourself this question. It's like, do I wish I had more access to my feelings, or do I wish I was being appreciated for what I am bringing, which is structure and letting you be feelings? And that's different.
Totally. Well, we'll just roll with me since I'm here, and people like the authenticity on this podcast sometimes. I think for me, it's the second one, I think for me, it's the second one. And also feeling a little bit of a pressure to be able to put what I'm feeling into words, but I think, if I think about my pattern and our patterns, it's a desire for appreciation,
So when you say the second one, it's actually both then, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So let me just collect.
Cool.
I think the challenge and the answer is, our work pretty well, but maybe some of your listeners don't. So I just want to give a quick overview that in our work, we break it down that there's a seer and a feeler. It's the simplest way to think about polarity. Even past understanding consciousness and light, when you understand that, and when you have a seer and a feeler, you have polarity. So you can only imagine what a lack of polarity in an argument looks like. I feel like blah, blah, blah. Yeah, well, I feel, you have same.
You go back and forth.
But imagine the same argument, with an open heart. I'm feeling hurt because I'm unappreciated. And then the woman says, I see you feel unappreciated. Now you have polarity inside of a disagreement. Now you're making love as you're coming into a shared reality about what both people are experiencing. So in our work, it's equally important for the men to have time to say, I feel, because you're here to grow in your heart, not just your balls. You're here to do more than just hold up the structure for everybody. You're here to connect to the deepest levels of love as well, right? And that's all going to be in the heart.
Yeah.
And so the more facile you get with feeling, the better, correct?
Totally. So let me just nerd out on this for a second, because I think it's interesting. So if the goal is to get into a place where there is polarity, or let's just call it life and connection, we're not in this like the back and forth, saying or asking the question, what are you feeling, is very different from saying, oh, I see that your shoulders are slumped down and you're sad right now. And for me, on the receiving end of that, it's a completely different experience than being asked to put some words to something, because then it almost puts me into like the generative role, right? Whereas if I get told that somebody sees me as something, there's a softening that can happen internally, and it allows me to access my feelings more.
Great insight. You totally nailed it. And also, most men haven't experienced bringing feelings in a way that creates any more polarity. Like most men, not only, Johnny, don't cry, they're told their whole life not to feel. And then when they do feel, it's usually like inside of heated arguments where nobody's winning. Very rarely have men experienced not only having space to feel, not being penetrated with a question, what are you feeling? Which is kind of an aggressive penetration that you would have to like submit to. You're feeling violated. There's no real answer to that except I feel a little violated right now. But when somebody sees you, she's bringing the seer it polarizes you into the feeler with space for you to feel. Space for you to feel. And if her seer is very well practiced and she's seeing you from her body, she's kind of like your oracle. She's not afraid to say, you know, like, let's say you say to her, like, God, I just feel like I'm failing right now. And she says, I see you're taking huge risks. And it's just a little scary at this moment. And you're just like, whoa, she just saw me better than I can see myself.
Yeah.
Now that's like lovemaking. And then it moves into lovemaking. That's pure ecstasy. And then you have the energetic agility to not get stuck there. And now you're making love. And she says, I feel my thighs heating up for you. And she takes the feeler back and you say, I see the woman I'm going to be with forever. You're using the seer and the feeler to alchemize conflict, get into lovemaking, and experience rapture. Because all it takes for polarity is a seer and a feeler.
Yeah.
And I just think that most men, when they're asked what they're feeling, it's not actually an inquiry into what you're feeling. It's I don't trust you right now, say more. And generally, men feel loved when they're trusted. Women feel loved when they're loved. And so questions that speak to not trusting you are like jabs. Even if they're veiled attempts to know what you're feeling.
Totally.
So it makes sense that you don't like it.
Yeah.
But it also makes sense that she wants to draw you out. She wants to like be there for you. And if she brought a powerful I see statement, she gets to actually give you the gift of what she's seeing. And it doesn't have to come from you. And, you know, Justin always says, like, he learned how to feel from me seeing him.
Yeah. And then perhaps the irony is, or just the magic of the way it works is by you doing that, then you get to experience probably like the part that you were actually desiring anyway.
100%.
Because it evokes this part.
It melts the walls on the moment. It melts the masks. It unifies the two bodies in one present moment and creates the ground for subtle or physical lovemaking.
Yeah.
And, you know, in the end, it's connection and shared reality are all anyone's really missing.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to just give permission also for any man listening to be open to being in the more receptive space for that. Because if somebody's really steeped in certain polarity works, they'll hear this and there might be an alarm bell going off of like, oh, but that means I'm in the receptive role and she's penetrating me with her. And that's bad. I'm not a man. Like that can't be masculine. You know, I need to be masculine, all this kind of stuff. And I just want to give a permission slip to say, actually, this really feels good and it works. And it's, you say energetic agility is really important for women. I think in this regard, it's also really important for men to be able to do that. And I'll say just for my own relationship that we do this, I feel practice sometimes. And it's really beautiful and really powerful and really disarming, but also really connective. And sometimes we forget to do it. And we get into the like, well, I feel da da da, and then I feel da da da, and then I da 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 da, and it never goes anywhere from that sort of space. It never does. And sometimes we'll catch ourselves and we'll drop into the I see, I feels, and just stay in that for a little bit until something melts enough. And then maybe we'll switch even in that moment. But it's almost always the case. I think it has actually always been the case that doing that simple practice melts something and gives greater connection to us in the moment.
Absolutely. I love that you're speaking to men giving themselves the courage to feel. I want to give a bridge for the men who have been in the more dogmatic, you know, it's scary to imagine you've heard all these things about like, she doesn't want your feelings. That's weak. She'll never follow your lead again. You know, I'm going to give you a bridge of courage to the I feel, because as you experience, like it actually brings more trust of her. She trusts you more after you show her your feelings, unless you get stuck there or unless you go into like story. But an actual heart feeling creates trust in her. But let's say you needed a bridge. Well, one of the things about learning how to feel and practicing your feel is you get good enough at feeling, you can feel her body as your own. So if you really go for this and you develop this ability, her orgasm you can feel in your body. So when you're bringing that non-ejaculation practice, when you're bringing attentions on her, you're not just kind of like holding space for her party. Like you're actually experiencing every single thing she can feel in her body as your own. That's the benefit of men learning to feel. And it's the only way that men will ever really be able to achieve true internal orgasm. Because if you can't feel like sadness, you can't feel pleasure. If you can only feel sadness like this much, but not this much, pleasure more than this equals ejaculation, premature ejaculation. Like you learn how to run feelings and you master non-ejaculation practice. So that's a bridge. And then the other bridge is a woman who never hears how you feel slowly loses trust in you, even if your spine is straight, your breath is deep, because she can see that you're building up. Every human feels. Every human. And you have to not feel, you have to either turn your heart off and only be in your balls, or you're like compartmentalizing all that. She can sense all of that. She slowly loses trust. And then you're like, look how I'm showing up and you still don't trust me? When are you ever going to trust me, Whereas if you would give her a couple of I feels because suddenly you see her body relax. And then like you said, it naturally flips and then she's the one feeling and you're seeing.
Yeah.
So that's just some bridge ideas if it feels scary to go there.
Totally. I mean, yeah, and that makes a lot of sense too. Like, why don't you trust me? I built this thing. I bought us this thing. I provide the money for this thing. And it's all, but it's always, there's like the little bit of distance, but it's also done in love too. So I just want to acknowledge that piece. Like a lot of guys express their love through acts of service, through acts of support. And like, don't you feel my love? I fixed the fucking bathroom, like for us. Seriously. But there is a piece that doesn't totally, like, if that feeling isn't there, you're right. Like there's something that's lost or just doesn't happen in the translation. And that's been a big learning for me too. Cause like I express a lot of my love in actions of support, in work on our land, in work on our house, in buying stuff for us. And it's because like, oh, I love you so much. Like I want to do this for us. And then if I stay in that mode for too long, like some juice starts to disappear. Like if the feeling doesn't happen as well.
Absolutely. And then it's like you go into the unappreciation thing because you're giving, and she's not softening for you. You have to remember men always have to remember Omega blooms when Omega trusts. Omega blooms. And sometimes men like work, build, create, provide, And if her body has tension in it, he feels like he's not trusted. He feels like he's not loved. And her body might have tension in it because she's worried about how tired you are. It's such a catch-22, Like she's tense because she loves you and you look so tired. And this kind of goes back to what I was saying about my client who started just throwing the party because she was moving in with her man. The reason why he brightened up is because he could feel her body relax. And the reason why her body relaxed is she started acknowledging what he was doing as opposed to his feelings about it. Because think about it, he was a grumpy grandpa. He wasn't feeling all connecty and soft. He was like, I'm getting a U-Haul, I mean, I don't know they were doing that, but you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And so women also have to remember to see those acts of service and not need it to be like their best girlfriend, not need it to be in the language of feeling all the time. And this is where we're constantly, it's like bumper cars,
Yeah. So I'm noticing the time and recognizing I've got one more topic I want to go into and just check in. Do you have like 5-7 more minutes okay, cool. Thank you. So, how to put this into words too. There's this desire, We'll talk about just desire and the expression of desire for a moment. And just to recap one piece, what I'm hearing from you is that if a man really wants certain things from his female partner, one of the best ways to go about doing that is to create specific containers of experience to give undivided presence and attention and love in that way, where the woman isn't worried about or wondering whether he's going to show up or not. And so she can relax into the trust of him, right? And let's say a man has desires for doing certain things with his partner, like sexual things or sexual scenarios. In your model, like, is there an ideal time to talk about those things? Is it in those scenarios where the undivided trust happens? Because I'm guessing when you and Justin go into practice mode, you're not talking about, oh, what are some things we might like to try? Or are you? Or do those conversations happen elsewhere? You see what I'm saying?
I think it's worth just telling you what our formal practice looks like because it's relevant.
Cool.
And so what our formal process looks like is Justin starts as the feeler and I'm the seer. So he gets feeling time and I get oracle time, seeing him. Then we switch, and that's the energetic agility. No matter where he's at the end of that timer, he's now the seer. And that's what allows us both to trust. He doesn't get lost in feeling. I don't get lost in seeing. Now I'm the seer, I'm the feeler, he's the seer. We do that for a certain amount of time. That puts us in total united, like divine union. Then we go into I want. I want is the magic formula for having fucking phenomenal sex for 15 years, even if you have sex every day, because you can grow sexually and spiritually together. So one of us will go first and have a period of time of I want. This is a desire. So, you're united, whatever, you're breathing together, you're with each other. And then Justin will say, I want, is it okay to say stuff?
You can say whatever. Podcast? You can say fuck, you can say ass.
Okay.
You can say,
so he'll almost inevitably say, I want your mouth around my cock.
Yeah.
Now, my equanimity, remember, I'm working consciousness too. My equanimity is to be perfectly allowing of his desires. So rather than being like, oh, we just started, like, what do you mean? Or whatever, any kind of reactivity. I'm breathing with his desires and I'm really letting them into my being, giving him the dignity of his moment. He's owning his desire. I love that he does this. Like, he doesn't back away. He's like, I want your mouth around my cock. And then he just sits there. And I get to be with it. And then what I do is I think, okay, I'm not just like, pleasing him like a courtesan. I'm like, all right, what would happen right now that would make that, like he would draw my lips there. Like I couldn't even help myself. And so this is where I talked about, like, I stay available sexually. Like, I'm not just going, well, I'm not in the mood. I'm like, what would get me in the mood where I couldn't even control myself? So I'll close my eyes and I'll like feel in and I'll go, well, what I would need is for you to breathe me so deep that you pulled me into you. And I had to have it. And then he'll start doing that. And then I'll start receiving that. Because if the woman's not receiving, game over. But you ask for what you would need, you start receiving it, and then literally it will happen. Because we've now, the ICI field puts us on the shared reality of like heart beginning into the heat. I want puts us in a shared reality of fire.
Yeah.
And then after his turn's over, I say I want, and then he says, what I would need. Like I say, I want you to compliment every piece of my body. And he goes, I would need you to stand up, put your hands against the wall and move your ass for me. And then he starts. It's so fucking fun. I mean, you've never had this much fun in your whole sexual history, even with a one night stand. Like it's amazing. And we do this like all the time. And stuff we wanted 10 years ago is like so old news. I said in the beginning, we're a monogamous relationship. We don't like have a thing on monogamy, so to speak. We're not clinging to that. But life is so wildly interesting in what we have going on. Why would you want the complication? Like we are literally adventurers constantly exploring new territory with each other in this bond of trust and love. And what's so beautiful that I see in this practice from all the couples we work with is men, especially after the last couple of years we have had, consent has become a thing, and I love that. But I've noticed men are really afraid to bring that penetrative piece. And men are really getting permission back to desire their woman. Because the thing is, what we see in our couples is that when a man pulls it all back, she feels hopelessly invisible. When he is so hungry that he pushes too fast, she goes on the defensive. But if he can rest and speak and name it, and then she gets to arrive there with him, his desire is the greatest thing in her entire life. Especially when he also happens to be a fucking kick-ass trustworthy man. You get both. You get this harmonic relationship with fire. Does that answer where you were going? Yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah, it does. Love that. It does answer where I'm going, what I was asking about. Yeah. And I guess so in those moments, just to clarify, you actually would stand up and move your butt towards him, your ass towards him, and he would take that in. But you wouldn't actually touch each other, right? The practice is for you to each be in your own space. And
the way Justin and I do it is because Justin's very accustomed to complete and total surrender on my body, where he touches me and my whole body. The only way a man's going to get that is if all the gates open before he touches her. So Justin, this doesn't have to be true for the men listening.
Yeah.
But Justin has a very deliberate practice that I initiate. So any touch, I'm the one that initiates it. But he also knows that I will initiate it. But he waits until he's opened every lock. There's locks in the body. Until every one of my locks is opened. And then when we initiate touch, it turns into having a woman who is literally writhing on you. And that creates easy restraint on his part, because when he goes in too fast, maybe 3 of my locks will be open and it'll be nice. But when all of them are open, we both see the face of the divine and we can't remember our names afterwards. And so we're spoiled and we wait for that moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but spoiled because you put in the work and cultivated this.
We put in so much work. Yeah.
Well, this is beautiful. Thank you so much for the conversation and for diving into all these topics and nuances. It's really, just fascinating stuff. And I encourage any couple listening to consider going to your workshop. We had a great experience. I know you have one coming up at Kripalu later this year as well. Occasionally you do them down in Sarasota as well. And what else would you like to tell listeners about how they can work with? Yeah.
Well, the one thing I would really encourage, if you're in a couple, we have a First Friday couples practice evening that people love on Patreon. And it's kind of a nice way to get a vibe on Justin and I leading an evening. And then Justin has a men's group on Patreon and I have a women's group on Patreon. And those are monthly meetups where you can ask anything. But the most important thing is really our book, Playing with Fire, The Spiritual Path of Intimate Relationship, because it lays out the model that I've been referencing. And it also has the practices at the end. And so I think that's probably the best place to really, if anything you heard today, you were like, how do I do that? The book explains how you do that. Would you agree? I think you probably read our book.
Yeah, totally. The book, what I would say is the book did a lot for us, and it didn't really land fully until we came to do the in-person workshop.
Oh, interesting.
And I would say it hasn't, I don't want to say it has fully landed either. I would say we're still in practice with it, too. As I guess that's just what happens with people,
Well, we are transmission teachers. And so when you come in person with us, we let you feel our practice through you. And so it's very normal when you're working with a transmission teacher to get home and be like, okay, now how do we get back to what we felt? Because you know how you said at the beginning, you guys had some of the best sex? It's that function. But what that's designed to do is like show you what's possible, and then you get there yourself.
Yeah. I think that's the crucial piece and maybe I'll just say this to close in my own thoughts, but that I think that aspect of transmission is an art form that is crucially important in today's world, and is going to become even more so important with AI and all this shit that's happening. And I think that was one of the really valuable pieces for us too. It was just being around both of you and feeling how you interacted with each other, but also how you interacted with us from your own places of cultivation. Like that was really profound, and I didn't get that from the book in the same way that just like actually breathing, 10 feet away from y'all while you guided us through a practice did.
Well, thanks for saying that. I appreciate it. And, that's why we're practitioners first, because if you just get into the like thinking about all this stuff, you're not dissolving into full realization through sex. And that's where it's at.
Yeah. Boom.
Boom.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Londin. I'll put a link to your book and your website in the description of this episode. I really appreciate your time and all your practice. And thank you everybody listening or watching on YouTube. And if you have any questions or comments, please share those under the YouTube version of this. That would be awesome. And yeah, look forward to seeing you all next time.